So like the title says, we'll be making this transition. Now you can use this transition for streaming or for editing, but at the end of this video, I'll show you how to take the file that we get out of DaVinci Resolve, make it more suitable for streaming applications like OBS. So without further ado, let's get started. Explore a wide selection of pre-made creative tools for DaVinci Resolve, like titles, transitions, slideshows and infographics, like bar charts and callouts, and much, much more. Link in the description for more information. So the first thing to think about is what are you going to be primarily streaming at for resolution as well as frame rate, because we're going to set our project to whatever that is. So we're going to come down here to the little gear, click on the little gear. In the master settings, we're going to set our resolution. So watching Twitch, it seemed like people were doing, I believe it was 1080, so 1920, 1080, and then the frame rate of 60. So we'll click that and then click save. Once we do that, we can come over to our media pool by clicking up here to get our media pool. Right clicking in here, going to New Fusion Comp. And because this is just a transition, we're just going to make it 2 seconds. So there we go, 2 seconds and 60 FPS, perfect. Hit create, drag this down onto our timeline, and then we'll jump over into Fusion. The next thing we're gonna have to think about is what do we want our colors to be for the theme of this? You know, what is your channel? Are they channels? I don't know. But what are your primary brand theme colors? For this one, I'm just going to be doing like a gray and a yellow. I thought that those look pretty good together. So we're going to grab a background. We're going to actually grab 2 backgrounds. I'm going to name them differently. So just hitting F2, I'm going to make this one G, and then take this one and make this one Y for green and or gray and yellow. So the yellow one, let's pick a yellow in here. So something like that, and then let's do a gray as well. Okay, so here are our 2 colors. To view them, you just, any node that you want to view, you drag it into a viewer so you can see it. Okay, so there are 2. Next, we're going to grab a mask. So grabbing down a mask, and we're going to connect that up to our gray. So there it is. Clicking on the mask, let's just go into one view for now, and I'll pull this down a little bit. All right, so in here we have our mask that's masking out that background, the solid background. Let's change the angle because I want this to be on an angle. So I'm going to do 45, and I'm going to hold down Control and zoom out with mouse wheel. So then we can take these and make them cover the whole frame. So how the transitions work in OBS is you're going to give it a video, and it's going to play the video, and then you're going to give it a time to switch the sources. So I think they call them scenes. We're going to be switching those scenes, and you give it a time. Since this transition is 2 seconds, the middle point's going to be 1 second. So the 60th frame. So if I come into frame 60 right here. So what we want to make sure here is that the whole frame, this whole frame right in here, is covered by something that we're creating now. It's going to play this video, and then at frame 60, it's going to be flipping the sources behind this video. We don't want the viewer to see that flip. So that's the whole idea here. So at frame 60, you have to make sure everything's covered. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to want to add in some type of an animation onto here. So if I come back to frame 10, let's start our animation there. By bringing this over, you're going to notice one thing. There's a corner here. And you might think that that's okay. I really wasn't a fan of that. So what I'm going to do is actually drag this out to make sure that the corner is above. And because this is still in the center, this corner will also be out of the frame as well. So we're at frame 10. I'm going to bring it way over here. Doesn't really matter where it is. And I'm going to come over to the center. We're going to click this little button here, which initiates a keyframe. And then we're going to move our playhead all the way to 110. And I'm going to bring this to the other side. So now we have an animation where it goes from one to the other. The only thing you have to make sure of is right here at frame 60 that we're filling the frame up. So we take a look at this. There we go. We have a wipe, right? And we can, we're done, right? It'd be the easiest way to do it. But we need to add a little bit more to this, you know, increase that production quality. All right, so one of the things that we can do is we can just take this rectangle. If we connect it up to the yellow, we'll have the yellow do the same exact thing. Then we can take the gray and we can lay it on top of yellow by pulling out from the output here and dropping it on this output. It'll add a merge, and it'll kind of add it in the way we're thinking it, right? So whatever we're taking, we're going to lay it on top of something else. So it brings out the merge, and by default, the way in which that we connected it, the background image will be whatever we dropped it on top of. And then the source that we pulled from, if we look here, it's going to be the foreground. And how merges work is it's going to take our background image, it's going to drop that down. So if we think of like layers, it's going to drop that down, and then the foreground is going to get laid on top of that. And all of these settings are how we're going to add that foreground image on top of the background image. So we have all these different settings that we can do. It's a good thing to keep in mind. The next thing that we're going to want to do is actually view this. So if I drag this up here, now we're actually viewing what's coming out of here. So that's something to always keep in mind. Whatever you have it on, that's what you're viewing. If we have two views up here, let me set that to fit. We can see that we have two little dots. If we click these dots, it'll just be which viewer, and you can also drag it up to the viewer to see that, right? Okay, so what I'm going to add in next is I want the actual wipe over to have that accent color like at the beginning of it, right? So what I'm going to do is grab in a transform node. That's this one here. I'll just move this other one over. And we can take this rectangle mask and manipulate the mask, not any image. We're going to manipulate the mask. So if we come from the mask and we go into the input of the transform, typically these would automatically connect up to the mask, which would be the blue, but we're going to connect it into the input. So now that allows us to take this mask input and manipulate it. And then we're going to come out of the transform and then into the yellow, right? And now we can manipulate that mask node that we currently had. So keeping all the keyframes over here, we're just going to manipulate the mask that gets pushed into the yellow. So what we can do here is if we move this, now we have a yellow. But the cool thing is we don't have to keyframe anything anymore because they're automatically just going off the keyframes of this rectangle here. But one thing that you'll notice is at the beginning here, because we weren't previously, we didn't think that we would need it, we're going to have to bump this back just ever so slightly. So coming into the rectangle, coming back to frame 10 where that first frame is, we'll just bring it back ever so slightly, just like that, so that the yellow's out of there. And now we have a nice wipe. So coming to frame 60, perfectly fine. Even if there was a little bit of yellow showing here, doesn't really matter. As long as the frame is covered, that's all that matters, right? Okay, so then that goes off. Looks great. Next, I'm not a huge fan of it looking so flat. So what we could do is we could add in a drop shadow onto this gray, because the gray is being laid on top. So if we wanted to visualize this a little bit better, we could actually, once my autosave's done, we'll drop that down and we can visualize it like this. So the green is the foreground, right? So that's this gray. What we could do is we could then add in a drop shadow. To get tools, you would just right click. We can go to add tool. You can go through there, or you can come to effects library and you have the tools here. What I like to use is the select tool. So we'll hold down shift, hit spacebar. We got our select tool. Now, if we know the name of the tool, we can type it in here. Drop. So we get the drop shadow node and boom, now we have a drop shadow, right? There's one weird thing that I didn't like about this though. We come back to the beginning and we start to look at this. It's like these corners, they don't go all the way down and all the way up. It looks like it's kind of like, I don't know, it looks like it's growing here, right? It doesn't look like it's already there. It looks like it's growing as it goes. So I wasn't a huge fan of that. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to make my own. What we're going to do is I'm just going to take the gray and we'll paste that. And then I'm just going to copy this rectangle and paste that as well. Connect it up. And if we take a look at this, what we can do in this rectangle now is we can increase the blur. So we'll use that for us. We'll also go into the gray and make that black because we want it to be a shadow. We're going to take this gray and drop it on top of our new drop shadow that we're making. So if we view it there, now we have a little bit of a drop shadow, and we'll connect this into our merge. We view the whole thing. We have a little bit going there. Additionally, we might want to, we could add in the the transform. It's not connected correctly. We'll connect it up that way, and we can bump this over ever so slightly. So now if we look at this, we can move that drop shadow until we get it to a spot we like. Also come into here, maybe drop this down just a little bit. And now we don't have that like growing effect happening, right? It's kind of there. All right, anyways. You could do that, you don't have to, but that's what I'm gonna do there. All right, so then next, I wanna add on a yellow little stripe to the back here. So we're just going to take all of this yellow stuff, copy it. We're going to paste that. And I'm just going to add it on because I want it to be on top of all of this. So we'll add it on here. We could take this rectangle that we've been working with and we shrink it down. This is the new rectangle. And in this transform, we're just going to bring this back. Now we have that little yellow line. I think I want to actually make that a little smaller. Make that a little smaller. There we go. Just a little accent, right? And so far, we got something that's working out. Obviously, until it caches, we got kind of slow. There we go. That's at 60. All right, so that's what we kind of have. But this little middle point here, it's kind of blah. There's not really much going on. If you have a logo, you could throw a logo in here. That would work. If you have a 3D version of your logo, you could throw that in here. Fusion allows you to bring in your 3D objects, so that's something that you could do. But I don't have any of those, so I'm just going to use the tools that are in Fusion, and one of them is the 3D text. So I'm just going to grab in the 3D text. I'm going to need a 3D camera and a 3D renderer. So I'm going to take my camera, connect it to the output of the 3D text, which will add a merge, and we'll connect that into the renderer. I'm going to bring up two views here, put the renderer over here, and the merge over in this viewer. Come into our text, and I'm just going to type in JRTV. So there we go. And we can change the color. Let's actually grab the other color we were using. So I'm just going to grab that hex number, bring it up to our text, come into here and paste that. There we go. A little bit about 3D. Using the middle mouse is going to be your best friend, whatever. It's going to be your go-to here. Holding down middle mouse allows you to look left and right. And then there's a couple of different modifiers, like you can hold Alt and middle mouse. It allows you to like rotate. Holding down Control and scrolling in and out allows you to zoom in and out. Those are primarily the things. So just looking at this now, we have our camera way up here. That's why we don't see anything in the viewer, because the camera is actually looking through this. So if we pull, whoops, if we click on the camera and pull the camera back, now we can kind of view that here. But if we look at our text here, it's really thin. There's no depth. So what we can do is on our text, come down to extrude, and we can add some thickness to it. But currently you can't see it here. Here it's kind of difficult to see the thickness. You can see the bounding boxes around because there's no cameras, right? So there's no shadows. So everything just looks really flat. We'll fix that. But for now, this is our main feed that we're looking at here. We're going to pull the camera back a little bit so that we kind of just have it right in the middle. I think I need to move it up a little bit. That looks about center. And I need to get rid of this font. Pick a font that I like. Here's a good one. I like that font. And let's bring it back a little bit more. I think that looks good. So let's add some like 3D stuff to this. Like show some depth with some lights. So this little light right here is our spotlight. That's going to be the one that's going to cast our shadows. Let's connect this into our merge. Currently don't see anything. That's fine, because we're going to have to come over to our render and enable lights and shadows, and everything's black because we need to come into our spotlight, which is right here, and pull it back, and then there we go. Look at that. So there's a couple of different settings that you can do here, but I'm gonna kind of leave it right in the middle there. You can change like the cone and the intensity and stuff like that. But my big thing is I don't want it to be like super bright where it's like blowing it out like that. I want it to be sort of bright, something like that, because if I come into my text and we come over to rotation, I want to be able to, whoops, wrong way. I want to be able to rotate it like this, and we get that like shimmering effect, right? So that's what we're going to be working with, but you can see that on the sides here, because there's nothing to bounce the light back in there, it's like pure black, which isn't really good. So we need to add in another light here. So just making sure that nothing's clicked. Shift spacebar. If we type in light, we're going to see all the different lights that we have available here. And I'm going to just get an ambient light. So it's just going to add light to everything. And we'll connect this into our merge. And now it's kind of lit up that a little bit. We can increase this and really start to get rid of some of those like real harsh shadows. So let's come back into here and rotate this. That's looking a bit better, right? So that's kind of what we're going to work with here. And the idea here is I want this to go from here, what is that, 90? So I'll keyframe the playhead all the way over here at 90 and come over to the other way and make this like negative 90. And then right in the middle, it's going to be facing us. So while it's being revealed, it's going to kind of have just that little bit of like specular like flashing there, or whatever you want to call that. Okay, so that's looking good. I think that that's pretty good for now. Let's add this in to our whole project here. So we'll move this up a little bit. Here's all of our 3D stuff that we've been working with. And if we take a look at what we've been working with here, we are going to be adding this all onto this gray here. So that's the main thing that we want to, coming out of this renderer, it's going to come out as 2D, and we're going to be adding this onto just this gray here. So if we take a look here, we have this little bit here is all of our gray stuff, because we had the G's here for the gray. We view this is just the gray stuff. And this is just our main gray. This is our drop shadow, so we don't really need that. We need to be concerned more about this gray here. So what we'll do is we'll actually go from this rectangle into the renderer. And the reason why is because I want this to cut it off when the gray is not being shown, right? And then what we can do is we can take all of this and add this in after all of our gray. So now it's only showing up here, because if we didn't have this connected, we would see the whole thing, and that's going to look weird. So we're going to add that in, so it's only on just this little bit. So that's the only time we see it, and then it kind of goes, you know, away with that gray as well. So that's the idea that we're going with here. But there's still a couple of things that could bring this out, like maybe almost like a spotlight on the background. So let's do that. Let's grab another background, and let's grab this yellow. We'll just kind of use the same colors throughout. Guess I could have made that, could have added that on. And let's grab a rectangle. Going to add that on, and let's add this right to this gray, right? So that initial gray that we had, we're going to add it on there. And in here, we're going to just go like that. And let's soften this. And I think we need to make this a little bit smaller. So we'll soften it something, maybe something like that. Okay. And maybe the blend mode, just ever so slightly bringing that in. But then we're going to notice something else here, is that we're now seeing it here where we shouldn't see anything. So we'll have to take this rectangle, tie that into the ellipse, and then on the ellipse, what we're going to do is we're going to use multiply. So anytime they overlap this mask with this mask, then the final result is going to show through, which is whatever is results of this, right? So that's the only time that that's going to show through. So that is looking a lot better. Okay, so now we have all of that. Take a look at this. It's really coming together. It's starting to look good. There's a couple of extra little touches to add to this, I think. One, I think for the render, this little render here, I want to add like just make it look a little older, right? So what I'm going to actually do is a Chromatic Aberration. So we'll add that on here. If we take a look at this, and let's see our settings here. So if we scale this, what does that do? Okay. What does this do? Alright. Oh, we make this bigger? Oh, yeah. There we go. It's looking a little cooler. Take a look at that. Alrighty. I think we could add one more thing onto here. We could add in some noise. Film grain? Film grain. I don't know which one to use. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, I don't see anything. Let's use the other one. See what that one looks like. Because I didn't even know that there was multiples. Let's view that. Oh, hello. That's a lot of green. Strength. That is a lot of green. Okay. Maybe that would work. It's adding a little bit of texture to it. Not looking all that bad. One other thing. I think that this gray here, the main gray, I want to add a little tint of like yellow in there. Kind of tie it in a little bit. There we go. A little bit of yellow in there, right? Ever so slight. And I think I'm also going to add into all of this mess almost like a light leak thing. So I'm going to have to kind of create this on the fly here. I don't know if that's moving too fast or fast enough, but let's use that. Let's feed that in and use this yellow again. Let's view that. Okay. So there we go. One of the other things I can do is I want to skew it a bit. So let's come into here and make the, I think that's right, the Y. I have to view it. Yeah. So we'll skew it a little bit, something like that. I think that that's a little much though. Maybe something like that would work. I think the other thing too I want to add in here is glow. Alright, where do we add it in this mix? Okay, so we add it in after the camera, I'm guessing. So we'll add, or after all of the 3D. So we'll add it on there like that. And then we need to also get this rectangle again. Connect that rectangle up. Take a look at that. That looks like shit. Let's go into screen and bring this blend way down. Alright, so how do we look after everything? Oh, that looks terrible. What happened here? I might want to turn up the ambient light source a little bit. When it gets here, it's kind of dark. There we go. I feel like this is like overpowering. I'm just kind of playing with it until you get something that you are happy with. But the other thing that you also have to remember is that this is only 2 seconds long. So I'm just going to clear my my cache quick. I'm going to let it cache out and see what this looks like. Okay, so now if we look at this when it's cached, it goes by pretty quick. It's kind of up to you if you think that the overlay with the light is a little too much. I think it is a little too much. And what I think we're going to do is maybe remove a little bit of it from the middle. So I'll actually connect this into here. And how would I do this? Subtract. So So if I come into here, maybe open this up, blur this a lot. Maybe something like that. That might work. So I just, in this ellipse, I turned it to subtract. So it's going to take this input and then it's going to subtract whatever, you know, this is as well. So you'll still have like that only using the one area, but whatever's in here, it'll also get subtracted. So that ends up taking this effect. I turn it on and off. We can see that we have a lot here. Turning it off and kind of being able to see the this a little bit. Okay, so I think that that's good. So we'll just kind of roll with that. I'm going to connect this up to our media out. The media out will then allow us to go back to the timeline. So if I come back over to the timeline, now we will see it over here. And if I was to, I have mine set up to auto go after 5 seconds. So 5 seconds pass by. Now it's going to cache this. And if I was working on a normal project, we would want this cache to happen just to make things go by a little quicker while we're working on the edit page. But it's not really that big of a deal here. But now we can view it, and that will be our animation pretty much for this. Some stuff I really don't like. I think I'm gonna go in and change here. I don't really like that. Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna come back over. I just have to do it. I think I'm going to get rid of a lot of this. I'm gonna do it like that. Let's let this cache again and see how it looks. So there we go. There's our new wipe. I guess that would be it. So now let's go in and actually render this. All right, so now it's time to render out. We're first going to pick a location for now, just a location you know of. And then you're just going to type in a name. We're going to go into individual clips. This will allow us to get the alpha out of them. We're gonna have to go into uncompressed. I kind of wish that DNxHR worked, but it seems like the tool that we'll be using doesn't understand where the alpha channel is. So hopefully that will get changed. What I'm really hoping is that the tool that we're using, the encoder, will get added into DaVinci Resolve since it's all open source and it's used by a lot of bigger people like Google. So, but we're gonna go into uncompressed. And we're going to go to BGRA 8-bit. And we're going to come down here to export alpha. And we just want to make sure that it is on straight. Once we do that, we can add it to render queue, hit render. And then here is our folder that we have that file in right on our desktop. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up a browser. If my browser opens up, we're going to open up a browser and we're going to search for Ffmpeg. And when we click on it, we're going to see download. And this is for all of the operating systems. So just pick whichever one that you're using. And then we're going to download that. And then next we have to go to where those files are. So if I take a look here, here are the files that came in that download. And we're going to look for the Ffmpeg executable. So the location of this is what we're going to need to know. If you're on Mac, you're going to be looking for your terminal to put in these commands. If you're on Linux, it's also terminal. If you're on Windows, it's going to be your command prompt. So I'm going to do the Windows route. Obviously, I'm on Windows. Hitting Windows key and typing CMD for command prompt. Now this comes up. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to just come in. I'm just going to copy this and we're going to put in CD and then Control V to paste that location in. I'll hit that in. Now we're in this folder, right? The next thing we're going to do is we need to, this is the command that we're going to be running. It's first going to run the command. It's going to want to know what files that we want to do. So it's going to be our main file. And then the codec that we're going to be using, VB9, which is the same thing that YouTube uses. And then the format of the codec that we're going to be using, it's the only one with alpha, so we have to use this one. And then what we want our file that's going to be completed, when it's done getting encoded, we're going to put our file name here, and the container is going to be webm. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this, drop it in here. Now you could put a whole file path in here, but I'm just going to make this super simple so people understand. Right click, I'm just going to copy that name and put that right in here. And we see that this is an MOV. You can also come into here, see it's a .mov. And then we just need to determine what we want our new file name to be. I'm just going to leave it new file, whatever, it doesn't matter. And so I'm just going to take all this, I'm going to copy this, come into our command prompt. It knows the exact location. I'm going to paste this here, hit enter. And now it's going to start encoding it with this new format. So if we take a look over here, our file, we can see here is almost a gig big. Now, if your computer streaming, has a whole bunch of sources going, you're playing video games or whatever your stream is, pulling a gig file to do a transition is ridiculous. I wish some of the other codecs would work to be able to convert, but it seems like Ffmpeg doesn't know the alpha channels and stuff of the other codecs, so this is the best way to go. So it's done. So now if we look in here, if we go to refresh, we have our main video file, which is almost a gig big, and then we look at the webm file, it's 1 megabyte big. So that's a big difference in file size. So now, I do not know how this is actually going to work. Can I open up another OBS at the same time? I cannot. Launch anyways. Let's see what happens. Hopefully this doesn't ruin my recording. Okay, so here is my other one. So let's go to that file. Let's over here. We're going to add a stinger and we'll name it whatever, new. And we need to go to this location. Obviously you can put these anywhere on your system, but I'm going to go to this location of that new file, add that new file in here. Transition point, this is in milliseconds, so this is going to be 1,000 milliseconds. Hit OK, so now it's on here. So now if I go to another scene, now we have that transition that happens. Yeah, so that's kind of how that would work. It's that simple-ish. I mean, I kind of wish that Ffmpeg would be implemented into DaVinci Resolve. Maybe they will, because it's open source and a lot of different services use it. So it would be great if it was. And I've seen that like Adobe has included it to make it easier to do these processes, so you don't have to go through this manual way of doing this. But you know, with DaVinci Resolve, it is possible. So don't think like, oh, I'm using DaVinci Resolve, it's not possible because this one little thing. It's definitely possible. You can create any animation. This animation that we created today isn't spectacular, but it at least shows you that it's possible. There are a ton of different things that you can do to simply add these things in, and you don't have to, you know, be working with a gig file, because I guarantee you this file would work. I'm not playing a video game or anything, but how would I edit this? This file would work. So if I went into here and grabbed this other file, did the same thing, it would work, right? But I'm grabbing a gig file, and if you're, you know, pushing a whole bunch of frames, I'm only going at 30 frames right now, that would be a bit intensive. So you don't have to go through that whole step of doing that, but you know, just look at the difference in size. You know, it's going to be an extra heft to your computer, especially if you don't have the extra resources to be able to deal with, you know, that. So that's how you would do it. I'm kind of just rambling at this point. That's kind of all I have. If you want the pre-made project files, they will be available. But yeah, that's all I really have for you for today. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. If you want to do a transition in a different style, you now know that it is possible, and you can use Ffmpeg to make it into a smaller format that like OBS can use. that is an option. I have plenty of other videos going over different styles of transitions. You could do one of those and then go through the whole process of re-encoding it into the format for OBS so that it's lighter weight. But yeah, that's kind of all I got for you for today. That being said, my name's JR, and thanks for watching, guys.